Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be another how-to. This is the old adage, apple a day keeps the doctor away, at bay, something. Well, keeping up on oil and other fluids keeps major engine and other problems at bay. So we're going to focus on the 5 primary engine fluids. They're not all for your engine, but they're all in your engine compartment. And you can do them all at once, and you can do them fairly quickly. Stick around to the end. They'll give you a tip or two. It might be helpful. That's a teaser, kids. So the first one you want to check is your engine oil. The engine oil is the one that gets the most wear and tear. It's the one that is the most vital to your engine continuing to run. And it's the one that's going to be least evident without checking it that you've got some sort of problem. Well, the advantage of checking your fluids is not just checking the levels of your fluids, although that's important, but it also will give you an indicator of where you've got some issues going on. You often don't know your oil is bad until your engine starts making a lot of noise, and damage is already done at that point. Now, it's not catastrophic damage necessarily, but it's irreversible. They don't heal, right? So whatever damage gets done stays done. The engine oil dipstick is almost always yellow, and it's usually up on one side of the engine or the other, or up front. And usually it's labeled, but on an older car it might not be, or it might have worn off or whatever. So look for a yellow dipstick near the front. Now, we'll get a little ahead of ourselves, but the transmission fluid in this particular car, in the Wrangler, is also yellow. Like most of the time they do that of a different color on purpose. The transmission one is almost always in the back and kind of tucked away. It's intentionally hard to find because you don't really need it, and they don't want you to get confused with the oil. So the oil is usually pretty visible. How often should you check it? It depends on your car. Depends on mileage, and the older the car, the more often you should check it. In an older car, 20 years or so old, I would check mine every time I stop for gas. You stick the gas pump in, you click the handle and let it go, come around, pop the hood, check your oil. Now in a newer car, you don't have to do it that often. If you start at the oil change point, start to see, like you go get your oil change and they tell you, hey, your engine oil is maybe a quart low here. Well, then you want to maybe get on top of that and check it more often. So if you've been running the vehicle, you can pretty much ignore where this is because it's going to be splattered all over the stick from spraying around inside the engine. But what you can do is get a little bit of a view of the oil. This one's a little bit brown. It's not too bad, but it's getting near the end of its life. Kind of probably oil change time here pretty soon. You can also wipe it on if you want to get it in your hands, you can wipe it on a towel. The paper towels they have for like the windshield washer at the gas station. So I'll pop it back in, pop it back out, and check. It's right at the top of the little nub there, considered full. Sometimes it'll say full, it'll say add if it's too low, and then you add here. And this one, fill neck is on this side, and you get a little quarter turn. Take the cap off. The cap tells you what kind of oil to use. On an older car, they won't say, so look that up. But 5W30 or 10W30 is pretty safe for most cars. Check your manual. So number 2 on our list here is your engine coolant. By the way, if you hear these terms coolant and antifreeze, they're pretty interchangeable. So it does both things. Your motor will overheat even if it's super cold outside. It generates a lot of heat, and so it needs this coolant to flow through. So the antifreeze component really just keeps it from freezing. If you use plain water, below freezing temperatures, the water would freeze. You get an ice dam, nothing flows through, and your engine overheats. The other thing that the coolant does is it dissipates the heat into your car. So when you turn your heat on, it's using a little radiator inside your car that it runs all of this hot liquid through, and a fan blows across and blows hot air out. If you're low on coolant, one of the telltale signs, it won't be very hot. It'll be kind of lukewarm or maybe even fairly cold. And that means you're not getting enough coolant in through the little radiator, what they call a heater core. That can be a lot of things that can cause that, but the most common reason is you're just low on coolant. But it's a good idea to check it periodically anyway, and it's fairly easy, particularly in newer cars. Older cars can be a little harder. This is your radiator in front. It's kind of covered by this plastic shroud, but underneath here is a radiator. But more often than not, there's a cap here like this. The problem is that when it's been running, this is hot and pressurized. When it gets that hot, it builds up gases. The gases build up pressure. And so this will be under some pretty decent pressure, and the fluid in there will be scalding hot. So if you were to pop this open while it's warm, high risk you'd burn yourself really badly. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
If it's been cold and it's been sitting for a while, you usually have to push down the radiator cap, and sometimes you got to push down kind of hard, but this one's not so bad. You just got to push down and turn a little bit, and when you turn a little bit, and see if you hear gas coming out, like when you open a pop bottle or a beer can, right? You hear psh, like, okay, if you're hearing a hissing sound come out of here, it's still under pressure. Close it back up, wait till it cools off. You get a little bit loose and nothing, and you get a little more, and then you feel like you're safe. Okay, you can take the cap off, push it down a little more. And then normally you'd be able to see down in here and just look and see if you have fluid. If you don't have one of these tanks, if you have an older car that's just the radiator. This isn't one of those, so this doesn't have a hole here. There's just a tiny little hole on the side that gives you that flow. So you can kind of see in there, but not very well. So for these Wranglers, this isn't particularly helpful. You want to check it in here, and that's true for most newer cars. This can be a lot of places. Here, obviously, it's right here on this car. I think in the Yukon it was over here, and then our other Jeep it was over here. So it's just wherever they could fit a bottle. So you pop this little lid open, you just peek down inside. So a couple things you want to look for when you're looking at this. First, obviously, is the level. On the outside, it's hard to see, but there's a max line, and there's usually also a min or minimum line. Or sometimes it'll say hot and cold. Max is usually hot. The cold is the minimum, because the levels will rise and fall with temperature. So the warmer it is, the more everything expands, and it's going to be farther up the tank. This one's impossible to see. There actually is a min line. I can see it way down at the bottom, but it's really hard to see. So if it's cold like this one hasn't run in a while. If it's cold, don't fill it to the max. Just make sure you have fluid in here. In this case, since it's cold, I would run it to min, or I can, because the max line is easier to see, I could just run this for a little while, get the engine up to temperature, and then fill to the max line. The other thing you want to look at is the color. And especially in a newer car, you want to make sure you're using what the factory specs are. So there's like yellow and green and pink and orange, and there's all kinds of different fun pastel colors. Those colors actually matter. The yellow one, I think, is considered a universal one. For me, if I just really need some, and it's overheating and I don't have anything else, I just put water in and then flush it and fill with the right stuff. It's not a great idea to mix different kinds of antifreeze. It's not a huge deal, and I'm sure there's a bunch of people out here that are going to comment about it's the end of the world, or it means nothing, it's all snake oil, and everywhere in between. In my opinion, I just don't think it's a great idea to mix them. So if there's pink in here, put pink in. If it's orange, put orange in. If it's green, put green in. Match what's in there. Check your manual and see if you've got the right stuff. One thing there isn't, though, for colors, there's no brown. There's no brown from the store. So if you look in here and it's all brown, like rust colored, well, that's what it is probably. It's probably rust, and you want to clear that out. So if it's really, really dirty, then a flush would be a good idea. You can do a flush yourself. I might do a video of that someday. It's a pain in the butt. I hate doing it. I make a mess. There's water and fluid everywhere. If you need to get it done, my advice, if you can spare the cash, go have the shop. Usually one of your local oil change places will do it. It can be a little pricey. It's maybe about $100, but they have all the stuff to contain it and keep it clean, and I'd recommend just paying somebody to do it if you can. I'm sure there's other YouTube videos for how to flush this. Like I said, maybe I'll make one. It'd be interesting, even though I hate it. But if you see fluid in here, you're okay. A little low, but it's not the end of the world, and don't panic, okay? Now, if this is dry, and you're looking in here, and you don't see anything in here, well, put something in, because you don't want to run it very long. So we'll move on to our third thing. Our third thing is power steering fluid. Now, power steering, you don't have to check all that often. Maybe when you do your oil change, your power steering pump will get real noisy, and you'll hear it whine when you turn your wheel. It's a pretty obvious sign you're either low on fluid or got a lot of air in there. And it's a closed system, so if you have that going on, it's either leaking, like if you're low, it's leaking, or if you've got air in there, there's a leaky hose somewhere and it's sucking air into the system. And you want to get that fixed pretty soon. It can do some damage to your power steering, particularly if it's just a leak or like a leaky hose. You hate to have to replace your whole power steering pump because you ran it dry and ruined the pump. The reservoir for them can be all over the place. Usually they're right on the pump. Like there's the pump pulley and the reservoir sits right there. The pump itself is always right in front of the engine or wherever your belt is. So some of the engines that are mounted sideways and the belt maybe is over here, the pump's going to be on that side. It's run by your big serpentine belt. And usually the reservoir is right here. However, in the Wrangler, it's up here. And hoses run all the way down to there. It almost always has a nice little steering wheel picture on it. Easy to find. This one black and it was kind of dirty and just kind of blended in. It took me a while to find it, but it's right here. You just unscrew and lift open, and you just, some of them will have a stick on them, like a dipstick with a fill line on them, but this one doesn't. You just sort of like, is it full? And if it's not full, you fill it. You know, power steering fluid is kind of power steering fluid. There's a lot of, that's not one of those that I spend a lot of time worrying too much about, like I would coolant. Frequency wise, like I said, I would just check it when you're in here and you're doing an oil change. You maybe go around and do a quick fluid check while you're at it. Number 4, brake fluid. Again, much like power steering fluid, unless you've got brake issues, you have fluid. Now, fluid could be a little dirty, and sometimes it's worth, periodically do a flush. I don't do it very often. In my cars, I probably, short of, I've done some track days, and so then you swap out to race fluid. But otherwise, I think I've probably changed brake fluid twice, maybe about 100,000 miles. Again, but some of those things that everybody's going to throw out a whole bunch of like, oh, you got to do this, you got to do this. Take a turkey baster and suck out the fluid out of the reservoir and throw it away or dispose of it properly and fill it with fresh brake fluid and be done. And if you do it right, you don't have to bleed the lines. But that's not what this is. This is just check it. The brake fluid's up here. It's almost always up here because your master cylinder is right, attached to the brake pedal. So it sits right here in front of the driver. Some of them will have a pop top lid, like a click-on or a bracket that holds a full lid on. This one just has a hole, like a single cap. And same thing, you're just looking at, is there fluid in there? And is it topped off? I always sit at a little bit of an angle. And so just if you have a line like this, just fill it to that line. And sometimes there'll be a line on it. Yeah. This one has, it's fold to this line. It's on the side. So just fill it with fluid. But mostly you're just going to take a peek, see how it is, see how dirty it is. So again, you just kind of wipe it off. If it's real brown and burnt, then you'd want to change it. But this is pretty clear, so no big deal. Just make sure it's full. Usually, unless you drive really hard, like a racetrack, you're just really, really hard on your brakes. If you do some really heavy city driving, stop and go driving, then yeah, you might. It takes a really long time. These new brake systems are pretty resilient. So you're just making sure. Same thing, probably the most frequent you have to do it is every oil change. The last thing is transmission fluid. That's almost always tucked in the back. Usually when I would do an oil change, I'll do all these fluids, and that's the same deal. I'll just do a quick check on the transmission fluid. You check it similar to where you check your oil. There'll be a dipstick. Sometimes it'll be red, just to kind of indicate, because transmission fluid is kind of a pink color. It'll be a red dipstick for some reason in the Wranglers. They chose yellow, which makes it a little confusing. Most of the time, it's either going to be, like I think in the Yukon, it's black. It's kind of hidden. And that's often by design. They, just like I said before, they don't want you to confuse the two. Chrysler, Fiat, whoever. For some reason, they didn't do that. Oftentimes, too, in the new cars, there's in this case you see here, I don't know if you can tell here, there's a clip here that kind of holds this. A good indicator, like it's just one of those things you don't really touch that often. This one has a little clippy pickup. On the Yukon, it had a lever you flip up, almost like like one of those missile switches you see on Top Gun or whatever in the movies. You flip this up and then you can pull the dipstick out. It's usually pretty long because it goes way back to the transmission. The only thing with transmission fluid is, depending on the car, you'll want to check it at temperature. Check it hot. Now I think this one has, yeah, okay. So it'd be hard to see on camera here, but there's a line here where it says this is cold and this is hot. Not all cars will have that, and if you don't have both, it's assumed hot. So get your engine to temperature. And the other thing you want to check is color. It should be a little pink. And again, just like before, not brown. That's what you're looking for. If it's real brown and messy, well, that usually means some sort of issue. Sparkle to it, that's not good. That means you've got some material going into your transmission fluid. If you're buying a car, and so before you buy the car, you're doing this quick check. By the way, if you buy a used car, this is a thing you should do. Check all these fluids. If you're buying a car and that transmission fluid is really dirty, you might think about looking for a different car. If it's your car and you already have it and it's dirty, then you might think about a transmission service. Those can be a little pricey. That's not an easy do-it-yourself thing. If you're not a real experienced automotive person, servicing transmissions is a little bit. You're bumping up a level. If it's just a little low though, then you want to look for a leak. Get underneath or look on the ground and see if you're seeing red. It's the difference between an oil leak and a transmission leak, because it should have a little bit of a red tint to it. ATF, what they call ATF fluid, automatic transmission fluid, is a little bit unique, so you want to make sure you get the right kind. It's not as unique as coolant, but there's a few different kinds for different manufacturers. They have different specs. Make sure you get the right stuff. And that, you'll need a funnel if you want to top that off. A long, flexible funnel, because that tube is at a weird angle. I honestly, I don't check it that often. It's far and away last on the list. Is it full? And is it pink? If any of those things aren't true, you should probably get it looked at. Now again, if you're on the road and it's shifting funny and you check your transmission fluid and it's low, fill it up. But then, like very soon, get somebody to look at your transmission because something's wrong. Sometimes a quick service, change filter, clean out the fluid, they'll do a flush. That can fix a lot of minor problems with the transmission, so that can help you. Like if that's true, do that as soon as possible, because that might save. I mean, transmission replacements or rebuilds are really expensive. The other thing I didn't do here, because I have already taken this off and I didn't put it back on because I think these covers are kind of dumb. They put these decorative kind of covers over top to cover up all this whole plumbing mess. Sometimes you'll have to pull that cover off to get access to some of this stuff. Like in this case, this covers up the oil fill. I just left it off. I never put it back on. But if you have a cover, sometimes you have to pop that engine cover off, and those usually come off pretty easily. They'll vary from car to car, but they pop it off these little posts. So anyway, that's the 5. Now, I promised you a tip, or 2. It's actually 1, but in 2 parts. Whatever, call it what you will. If you have one of these older cars that I talked about where you're checking your oil pretty often, and maybe you stop and get gas and you check your oil and you find it's a little low and you want to add it, so you run inside the gas station and you get a quart of oil. And they don't have any little funnels, right? So what do? Like, you're going to try to hit this tiny little hole here? It's pretty small. You drive an old car long enough, you get pretty good at this, but still, it's hard to get that in here. There's it's tight space in here. Trying to get that to pour in that tiny little hole with a full quart can be tough. So what you can do is, now this isn't as common as it used to be, back in the day when cups were paper. Now they're plastic or styrofoam. But if you have a paper cup, then just tear the cup. There's a seam in the cup. So tear the cup along that seam, just nice and easy. Tear it off the base. Somebody's gonna go, this is just easier if you just do it this way. Yeah, I know. Whatever. And you just roll it up and you make your own funnel out of it. You stick that down in the hole, and then when you just gotta get small enough to get in there, and once you do, then you can let it go and it will fan out. Rotate it, so whatever at the big end, it's not straight, so it's gonna have an upswing to it. Put that on the bottom, and you got a little funnel. But it's better than spilling oil all over your exhaust headers and having smoke on you. Get rid of that. Now, they don't have paper cups, no, they have this plastic or whatever. Get a water bottle or a pop bottle or a soda for you non-Midwesterners. I do always carry a knife with me, and if you have an older car that you drive around, having a nice multi-tool is a pretty good thing. Leave the cap on, and it doesn't take much. This is not a sharp knife. This is not a strong bottle. Not strong plastic. Now you can take the cap off, stick that down in the hole, and there's your funnel. This wasn't really low on oil, so I'm not going to add a whole lot in there, but you get the idea, right? So, there you go. Little makeshift funnels. Now, you can make this funnel, sometimes if you go in those gas stations, they'll have food and maybe paper plates or those cardboard containers or whatever. I mean, any one of those things can make a decent funnel. You just kind of got to tear it apart, remold it. And all you care about is that you get a little bit wider opening up higher where you can pour a lot easier and not have to pour down into a hole. This one actually isn't that bad. Some of them are even worse, tucked down in there. So hope that helps you. Thanks for watching. Hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. I actually don't know where the power steering fluid reservoir is in this. Huh. All right. Oh, there it is.